Parents have had their work cut out for them for quite some time, especially when it comes to educating their children. Gone are the days of dropping off Bobby and Abby at the school for a day of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Parents learned the hard way during COVID that American public schools and colleges had substituted a curriculum of excellence for one of indoctrination. And when parents voiced concerns about the learning standards, Biden and Democrats did not call the Department of Education to address their problems plaguing our schools. They called the FBI to investigate parents as domestic terrorists. So much of today's dysfunction is a direct result of the federal bureaucracy housed at the Department of Education. When the DOE was established in 1979, the illiteracy rate in America was 0.6%. Today, it stands at 21%. For decades, Republican candidates pledged to kill this multi-billion-dollar agency that has failed our schools, parents, and children. And thankfully, President Trump recognized that we needed a mom in charge, which is why I'm so honored and excited to welcome to the stage someone who has been at the forefront of saving our schools, our kids, and our families. America's final Secretary of Education and recipient of the 2026 Charlie Kirk Defender of the Family Award, Linda McMahon. So before we start this conversation, we have someone who's a very dear friend of the American Principles Project. Wasn't able to be here tonight, so he recorded a video, and we're going to play that now.
Thank you to Terry Schilling and everyone at the American Principles Project for your tremendous work and patriotism. I especially want to congratulate our great Secretary of Education and my friend. She's a friend of mine for a long time, Linda McMahon, for winning the Charlie Kirk Defender of the Family Award. Linda's been a good friend for so long, and she really loves America's children. I know her so well. She loves legitimately children, which is nice of your Department of Education. So I want to say, Linda, congratulations. And with Linda's help, our administration has fought for American parents and students like never before. On day one, I signed an executive order to slash federal funding for any school that pushes transgender insanity on our youth. This transgender thing is out of control, but we've got it under control now. We inherited this from previous administrations. We got critical race theory out of the schools. We protected the right to school prayer. As part of our historic tax cuts, we're giving countless children and parents the opportunity for school choice, that the parents can send their children to a school that shares their values. And once again, congratulations to Linda, and thanks for everything that you've done at American Principles Project. It's incredible what they're doing, the achievements. And one of the other things that I will mention is no men playing in women's sports. That's another thing you work on. And I just want to thank you all. Fantastic. And Linda, congratulations.
That was nice. No, he's been our champion, and he's very serious about dismantling the Department of Education.
I think I know that.
So, all right, so the first thing I want to ask you is, obviously you served the first Trump administration with the Small Business Administration. How is it different being at the Department of Education, and what's the job like now?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible honor for me to be here tonight. And I want to say a special thank you to my dear friend Kelly Loeffler, the current SBA administrator, who is just fabulous to work with and has become a good friend. And as she said, we have such a great cabinet. We all enjoy working so much and doing what we're doing. So it's a real honor to have her tonight to share in these festivities as well. So how do you compare Department of Education versus Small Business Administration? Well, in some ways, they're very much alike because you're striving in both instances to make something better. And how can you make something better? Small businesses, you're building them up, you're making sure they have the capital that they need to succeed, that they get advice, that they're working with their local banks, all of those things to make sure that small businesses have what they need, that they have the right tax breaks and all of that. Education, we're striving to make something better by returning education to the states and making it the purview of parents and teachers and school principals and local school superintendents and governors. Because President Trump believes, as do I, that the best education is that that's closest to the child. Not some bureaucrat like me sitting in Washington trying to dictate, what's happening. And I'll give you a specific story. There was a mother, a very concerned mother, and I fully appreciated her concern. She had a child with special needs. And she asked me, she said, look, I'm really afraid if you close down the Department of Education, I'm told the funding is going to stop and that I'm no longer going to be able to have access to the things that I do now for my child. And so you close down the Department of Education and I'm really afraid for my child. And I looked at that mother and I said, well, let me ask you something. I said, who's better able to determine the needs of your child? You who work with your child every day, you take your child to school, you're talking with your teachers, you know what your child needs. Are you not the best advocate for that child? Surely you are. And let me say to you, the funding will continue to flow. If the Department of Education moves different programs to different agencies, that will not shut down the funding. The funding comes from Congress. And the Department of Education is merely a pass-through for that funding, to get to where it needs to go. And now we'll have fewer regulations, fewer people involved, and it'll be better all around.
Yes. I will never forget, in between the election and the swearing in, we had a Zoom call, and I asked you, I want to talk about what your priorities were, and I didn't know if you were going to go, we need to get rid of, use the Department of Education and ramp it up and get rid of this. And you said, no, I'm just going to do what President Trump said he wants to do, which is dismantle the Department of Education. But you're the first secretary, I think, in American history whose task has been to make yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, when the president calls you at 10 of 11 one night, and he says, I have the perfect job for you. Now, this is after I had served as the co-chair of the transition committee, in which we had putting the whole cabinet together and hiring staff and doing all of that. So we've been doing that for 3 or 4 months down to Mar-a-Lago, and then I get this call and he says, I've got the perfect job. And I said, yes, sir, how can I be of service? And he said, well, I'd like for you to be the secretary for the Department of Education. And I kind of took a deep breath and I said, well, sir, I don't have any experience, in education, except, he said, well, you went to college, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did go to college. And I said, and I majored in French. I said, I got my certificate to teach. I said, I have served on the State Board of Education in Connecticut, and I've been on the Board of Trustees of Sacred Heart University for about 16 years. And he said, that's great. And he said, because here's the thing. I don't want someone who's really buried in education to come in to do this job, because your primary job will be to fire yourself. And I said, well, that's a real tempting offer to just, be. I said, how long do I have? He said, well, as long as it takes, but he said, I think it'll be quick, don't you? And I said, I will try my best to make it quick.
So why is shutting down the Department of Education and dismantling it and getting rid of the micromanaging of our education system so important?
Because I think that you mentioned the statistic, or Kelly did, that the Department of Education was voted on in 1979. It actually took effect in 1980. I think you were quoting the literacy rate. And since that time, we've spent $3 trillion on education. We've tried all kinds of national programs, and I think with the best of intentions. I think President Bush's No Child Left Behind, President Obama's Race to the Top, core curriculum, they were all put forth with the idea that this would make education better. But what we really found is that you cannot run education on a national program because communities are different. The needs for schools in different communities are vastly different, across the country. For instance, Governor Stitt from Oklahoma was telling me about the magnet school in Oklahoma that focuses on space design and technology because that's a primary industry. That's not the same thing in Topeka. And so to have programs that try to serve everyone all the time is just not going to work as well as that state-based, state-focused, education.
So we're just getting off of a government shutdown where kids were locked out of schools, we were being force-fed, they were stuck in their homes, forced to wear masks. Oh, I'm sorry, these were the most from the Joe Biden administration.
Yeah.
But what was it like we did just get off an actual government shutdown. What was it like at the Department of Education? What did you see there?
Well, it's very interesting because I was asked about that, and I said, it's funny. Government was closed down. Kids went to school, buses ran on time, teachers got paid, meals got served. Basically, nothing. Because the Department of Education does not have that responsibility. I think it's often misunderstood that the Department of Education controls curriculum. We don't. We don't hire teachers. We don't buy books. We don't do any of that. We are a pass-through for federal funding to make sure it gets to states. And there are competitive grants that the Department of Education works to make sure that funding that comes from Congress, there is competitive bidding for that. But our thought is that if more of that funding were to come in block grants to states who know best how to spend their money, with some guardrails, but know best how to spend their money, and we'll get the regulatory component out of the way, and that money would then go, without the kind of strings that's normally attached. I'll give you one little stat that was given to me by the superintendent at the time of schools in Tennessee, and she told me, she said, we did a study, and for every dollar of grant money that comes into Tennessee, a teacher will spend 47 cents of that dollar with regulatory compliance. I said, well, let's get the money to the kids.
It's incredible. This is exactly what we need to be doing in our education.
Thank you.
I'll never forget when I looked at my kids are in Fairfax County, and when I looked at the Fairfax County School Board budget, half of every dollar goes to administration costs. And that's really Department of Education, the State Department of Education, and so I'm glad that you're cleaning it up.
And one other stat, when we're talking about why it doesn't work, from Washington, when you think about the fact that only 30% of our 4th graders, 8th graders, and 12th graders can read with proficiency, we have failed our children with education. And not, as I said, without trying, not for not trying.
Yeah.
Because it is really, it's time to do something different. It's trying to make a change. And I think it has to go back to the states to serve the communities and the children who were there, where parents are the deciders of their children's education.
That's exactly. So you're not just a mom, you're not just a CEO, you're also a grandmother, 6 grandkids, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's the reward for having children.
That's right. That's right. They give you more.
I read that somewhere. I love my kids.
So this is personal for you, right? And you're kind of like setting a future and fixing the future of America's education. What do you envision in America's education system for your grandkids? And then, this is hard to think about, great grandkids that follow after that.
Yeah, well, I'm now on a tour across the country visiting many schools, and I've seen micro schools, public schools, charter schools, religious schools. So there are a lot of schools around the country that absolutely have wonderful, wonderful programs. They're not innovated from Washington. They're innovated at the state level. So I've seen aspects of many schools that I would like to see incorporated in more schools. But the one program that has really proved successful in literacy, which is my #1 issue as Secretary of Education, is literacy, is the science of reading. We have seen great promise with that, great effects, great success in the states that have used that. And they've gone from being close to the bottom of being able to read to like midway and now working their way up to the top. So there are a lot of different schools that if we could take bits and pieces of them and put it together, but school should be a place of open innovation where teachers can teach and children have the ability to learn, explore, discover, be kids, but learning how to read will make them better students and better citizens. So that's my hope for these schools.
Of course, I agree. I think it's great. Yeah, no, there's this like artificial war, I think, that's been set up by all the government bureaucracy, like teachers versus parents. You know, when I was growing up, anytime my mom got a call home from the school, she never took my side. You know, it was always taking the side, and rightfully so. I wasn't, you know, we're eventually, all the work you're doing is eventually going to have to get votes in Congress. Congress is eventually going to have to start making this law, and we are in a room full of 600 people. All of them care about the family. All of them care about schools. There's not just donors here, but there's social media influencers. There's people that host TV shows like Jack Posobiec. There are activist groups. There's leaders of other groups. So my final question to you, Secretary McMahon, is what can people in the room do, or groups like APP, to help with this process when these votes start needing to come up?
Well, first of all, be involved. Be involved in your children or your grandchildren's education. I mean, I applaud those parents who go to school board meetings and they challenge what's happening, or that they run for school board themselves, because that's also very important. But you need to call your congressman when the time is right, when this is, you know, up for a vote, or if you see the things that we're doing and you like what you're hearing, call your congressman and let them know that, you know, these are things that are being offered, you know, at the school in my district, and I found that it's being, you know, that is something I would like to see, because other districts, other states have proven success, and I want that for our school. So that'll be very important.
Well, Secretary McMahon, we all think you're doing a fantastic
Thank
job,
you.
and we're so grateful that you're here. Can we give her a round of applause? Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank you very much.